The 2024 NFL receiving draft class has every type of player you could want from a draft evaluation standpoint. It has the premier prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr., who some view as not only the best receiving prospect since Ja'Marr Chase, but some people even have him as the best receiving prospect since 2021 Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson. There's another great receiving prospect that's pretty damn close to where he is, that would be the number one receiver in nearly every draft except this one, and the one Ja'Marr Chase was in back in 2021, and that of course is former LSU receiver Malik Neighbors. There's even a third big receiver at the top, though he is mostly viewed as a tier below these guys, but still worthy of a top 10 draft pick, and that is Washington's Rome Odunze. Simply put, this class is loaded. In today's video, we will be ranking the receivers from this draft class and discussing landing spots for them, their outlook at the NFL level, and a whole lot more. Before we dive into my receiver rankings, if you guys have a top 5, 10, or 15 receivers in the 2024 class, maybe even 20, please feel free to comment them below, as this could not be done without your guys' support, and I never wanted to lose sight in terms of how appreciative I am of your guys' support. And if you guys are interested in drafting any of these guys in a 2024 fantasy best ball draft, well, you can use the QR code in the bottom corner. That is a link to Underdog Fantasy, and you can not only draft these guys, but you will also receive a free $100 deposit match. So if you want to play a $10 fantasy league, well, you can, and you can essentially play it for free because you're getting that free deposit match. And with this being before the draft, there's a chance to get a big steal on some of these guys, and an example from last year would have been Puka Nacua, who was way undervalued, and he wanted to have a 100 reception, 1,400 yard rookie year. So I hope you guys enjoy the rankings video. This is by far the hardest and longest I've ever spent on a video. There's easily 100 hours put into this video, and I hope you guys enjoy. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Germaine Burton is an interesting prospect from Alabama, and he finished his 2023 season averaging over 20 yards per catch and tacked on 8 touchdowns for the Crimson Tide in 2023. The name of Burton's game is speed, and he hauled in 5 of his 8 touchdowns in 2023 on passes that were 20 or more yards from the line of scrimmage, and he is always a big play threat. He is a pretty raw prospect, but Germaine has a couple of things going for him, and the big thing with Burton as he transitions to the NFL is where he lands. He obviously has the speed to stretch any NFL defense, and this may be surprising if you didn't know this, but Burton did not drop a pass in 2023. And dating back to his time at Georgia in 2020, Germaine only dropped 4 passes in his entire college career on 169 targets, which is a very low rate, and half of those drops occurred in his freshman season. So we're talking about a prospect here who has just 2 drops on his last 121 targets, and a guy who clearly has elite speed. I think Germaine Burton is the epitome of a number 2 receiver at the NFL level, and I think he is a better version of Jalin Hyatt as a prospect from the 2023 class, who just finished his rookie year with the Giants. Jalin had nearly 400 yards as a rookie, and I think Burton can have a lot more than that in 2024, but I think this is a guy who can have anywhere from 700 to 900 yards per year at the NFL level, and be a guy that always has to be accounted for. He very clearly has a role on an NFL team, and not only can he be a good number 2 receiver, but he can be a guy that takes handoffs, screens, and drag routes to the house too. Yes, there are some limitations to his game, and he wasn't as good of a yak guy as you would have liked for how fast he is, but this is a player who can be a key contributing day 2 pick. Xavier Legette to me is a hit or miss prospect, and the pros when watching him are clear. He's big, he's strong, and he is hard to bring down, and I mean hard to bring down. He dropped just 2 passes on 97 targets in 2023, and he is a legit 225 pounds. He's not a case where a university would lie up for him in weight, and he actually played at 215 and listed him at 225 to make him look better. It's clear when you watch him play. From a sheer athlete standpoint, yes, I do see the Debo comparisons, and it is ironic that both guys went to South Carolina, but what needs to be remembered for Legette is there's only one Debo in the NFL. Debo Samuels aren't common, and while that comp is fun to make, having an offense devote that type of attention and development to him as a football player is rare. From a receiving standpoint and how he projects to the NFL, I thought Legette was slow off the line in game, and his acceleration was, to me at least, a lot slower than other guys. I have have no doubt about his high-end speed because he reminds me a lot of an 18-wheeler in the sense when he gets going, he is tough to bring down. I'm sure we all grew up playing backyard football with the one big kid who in 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 would take an entire team to bring him down, and that reminds me a lot of Legette when he plays, which is a good thing. However, he is a very raw receiver, and that's clear when you watch him on tape. He will need an offensive coordinator that calls him in motion for jet sweeps, or has him run a ton of drag routes or bubble screens to get the ball in his hands. I think at this point in his career, Xavier is way more of an athlete than an NFL receiver, and I know people are going to view that as a negative, but it's honestly about getting him the football. He can win contested catches, he will bully the hell out of corners, and he is a tough guy to bring down. NFL defensive coordinators will not want guys under 200 pounds covering him one-on-one because that's a big play waiting to happen. He is not a refined route runner at this point, but the noise he makes as an athlete does not go unnoticed. He can be a problem at the NFL in the right situation. He is one hell of a chess piece for a team that is willing to invest in Xavier Legette. Roman Wilson was a very fun prospect to watch, and he finished his final year with the Wolverines with nearly 800 yards and 12 touchdowns. Roman has very good speed, very good quickness, and on top of it, he is a very good route runner. I really think if Michigan chose to throw the football more in the 2023 season, that he could have been not only a 1,000-yard receiver at the collegiate level, but much higher as a draft prospect and a guy who would be close to being a first-round pick. Roman had 67 targets in 2023 and had a singular drop, and I think his floor as an NFL player is pretty high considering he does two of the most important things as a receiver at a high level, which of course is get open and not drop the football. He also played 31% of his receiving snaps outside in 2023, compared to just 9% in 2022, though I don't think being an outside receiver will be, or should be, the name of his game at the NFL level, though he can play there if need be. When I watch tape on college prospects, I always think about focusing what a guy can do versus what he cannot do, and there's a lot of good things Roman does. My NFL comp for Roman is a guy who has the same size hands as him, which is 9 1/8, and ranks in the 30th percentile, and a guy whose arms are a quarter of an inch longer than Roman and actually plays professional football in the same state as he went to college. That, of course, is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Roman is faster, but I think there are a lot of similarities between the two players, and I think Roman will be a good NFL receiver for a very long time. I don't think Roman will necessarily have the production Amon-Ra has had, as he has back-to-back 100 reception seasons, but I think Roman can be used in an offense the same way. He is a good prospect and also brings a deep threat element and should walk into at least 600 or 700 yards from day one. Blink and you might miss Texas Xavier's Worthy, as speed is his main calling card. Worthy ran a 10.55 100-meter dash in high school, and it shows on the football field. Worthy obviously has the highlight reel plays showcasing his speed, but he's not just a deep threat, and that's a big thing to remember with him. He hauled in 60 or more receptions in 2 of his 3 years with the Longhorns and had 2 800-yard seasons, and finished his career with 25 receiving touchdowns. He was a 2-time first-team all-conference player, and if you liked Jameson Williams as a prospect, which I did by the way, then you'll love Worthy, as there are a lot of similarities between the two, and that would be my NFL comp for Xavier. Like Jameson, the negatives in Worthy's scouting profile are pretty clear. He's very skinny, and you see that right away. If a corner like L'Jarius Sneed was pressing him all game, well, it would probably be a long day for Worthy, and he does not have the get-off-the-ball ability like we saw with another receiver that was under 175, and that was back in 2021 with Devonta Smith. With Smitty, the notion was if you can't touch him, it doesn't matter. But there's times on tape where Worthy does get jammed, and not only does he get jammed at times, but if he doesn't have a clear path to the end zone, a lot of the time he goes down on first contact no matter who it's from. These are things worth noting because defensive players are only going to get bigger, faster, and stronger at the NFL level. Make no mistake about it though, I love Worthy and I think he clearly has a role in today's NFL, and if you can have him be your second receiver or even a high-end third receiver, he will stress opposing defenses out because of his game-changing speed, and like Jameson Williams, he always has to be accounted for. There were times in 2023 where the Lions handed the ball off to Jameson in motion, and I would love for an NFL team to do that with Xavier because the potential here is off the charts. He is a solid route runner, and if he can can get off the line of scrimmage, it's going to be tough to keep up with him no matter who the DB is. I like Worthy a lot for what he is as a prospect, and I hope he goes to a coach who knows how to maximize his game. Jaylen Polk was a player I really enjoyed watching, and in his final year with the Huskies, he had over 1,150 yards and 9 touchdowns, and had 7 100-yard games. There are a lot of things to like with Polk, and one of those things, of course, is his hands. He has phenomenal grip strength, and he is a very good receiver in contested catch situations, kind of like his teammate Rome Odunze, who we will get to later. Jaylen does a lot of things right as a receiver, whether it's hauling the football at a high rate, as he actually had a lower drop rate than Marvin Harrison Jr. in 2023, and like his teammate Rome, he's physical as hell and he's not going to get bullied. I wouldn't say this is a negative in Polk's game because Jaylen isn't viewed as a top 15 prospect or a guy that's a surefire first round pick, but with his evaluation, 2 of the consensus drawbacks are he's good, but he won't be a true number 1 receiver, and he's fast but not ridiculously fast. And to that I would say, who cares? Jaylen does so many things right, and he should be taken in the first 2 rounds because he is that good of a prospect. He's strong, he has great hands, he runs good routes, he can play inside or outside, as he had 41% of his snaps at slot in 2023 and 59% outside, and he will be a good NFL receiver for a long time. To some degree, I think this is similar to Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase a few years ago, when Jefferson was overlooked as a prospect, but obviously I'm not placing those expectations on Polk or anything like that, but I think there is a good chance that 2 or 3 years from now, we might look back and wonder why Jaylen Polk wasn't viewed as a higher graded prospect. I think a good comp for him is a prime Adam Thielen, as both guys are good route runners, have strong hands, and make everyone's job easier. Somebody will be getting a steal with Jaylen Polk on day 2 of the NFL draft. Ladd McConkey from Georgia was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, and if you're a 3-star going to Georgia, well, you can probably imagine that Ladd was a gym rat, scrappy, sneaky fast, lunch pail, first one in, last one out, and a sneaky athletic guy. He is a very good route runner and has quick feet, and has great acceleration, and keeps opposing DBs honest every play. With Ladd, I think it's important to remember who he is as a player and who he is not as a player. He is a smaller prospect, and his game should translate anywhere, because if you can't design plays for him in today's NFL, well, that's a problem, because Ladd does a great job at creating separation, and that is one of the most important things at the receiver position. He's a great route runner, he has a high football IQ, and to be honest, I would be surprised if he's not a solid receiver at the NFL for a very long time. I think he is comfortably a top 50 prospect, and not only is he a top 50 prospect, but him having 60 or 70 receptions a year for the next several years, which again equates to just 4 receptions a game, is very doable for Ladd. Like we said, there are definitely physical limitations, and hand size is a cause for concern, but he didn't drop the ball at an insanely high rate in college to the point where it was noticeable. Yes, he had a few drops here and there, but it wasn't egregious. He performed in a big way at the Senior Bowl, and he showed everybody he can and will compete with the best of them. I think the Panthers would be a great landing spot for Ladd, and getting Bryce Young a receiver who can get open and consistently, allowing both players to grow, would be critical for each guy's development. I don't think Ladd will be a first round pick, but to me he is a high floor player because he does a lot of things right. This is a very loaded receiver class, and it's easy to get caught up thinking about other players, but Ladd will have a place in the NFL for a long time. Keon Coleman can be a polarizing prospect depending who you ask, and what I will say about Keon, more so than other receiving prospects, is where he lands in the NFL is critical. He has the physical tools to be a good red zone threat and a good receiver at the NFL level, but if he is expected to be the number 1 guy from day 1, then I would have concerns. Having said that, there is a lot to like about Keon's game, and his ceiling is considerably high. He is a guy that would have succeeded 15 to 20 years ago when corners really got into the grill of opposing receivers, and I think Keon has that true alpha mentality and wants the ball in his hands with the game on the line. He had a big game-winning touchdown against Clemson, and a player I think Keon favorably compares to is former Florida State Seminole Anquan Boldin. Both players have or had extremely strong hands, and in Keon's final year in college, he dropped 0 passes. Not 1 or 2, but 0. And on 175 targets in his collegiate career, which dates back to his time at Michigan State, he had just 3 drops, so hauling in the football for Keon is not the problem. The reason I worry a little bit about Keon at the NFL level is his route running at times isn't the smoothest, and creating separation isn't as natural for him as it is other receivers in this class. No disrespect to Keon, as he had a good final year at Florida State, as he would haul in 11 touchdowns and be named a first-team all-conference player, but playing guys like Sauce Gardner twice a year is different than putting up 140 yards against Syracuse. That's not intended to be disrespectful as much as it is to acknowledge how much of a talent gap there is between the ACC and the NFL. My favorite landing spot for him would be to go to a place like Buffalo and effectively replace Gabe Davis, as I think he is gone in free agency, and eventually be the successor to Stephon Diggs. Having the attention on Diggs in year 1 and also being in the same receiver room and being able to learn from a guy like Diggs would be critical for Keon's development, because that's where he needs the most help, is winning the route early. I have no concerns with him as a big body jump ball receiver, but I came away from film study wanting more from him with the little things and the nuances within his route running. The flashes are very high with him, but the lows are, well, low. I think he can be a good NFL receiver, but destination is critical for Keon Coleman's NFL success. A.D. Mitchell is one of my favorite receiving prospects in this class, and after playing sparingly at Georgia during his first 2 years, he had an 800-yard, 11-touchdown year for the Longhorns in 2023, and had 3 100-yard games along the way. I think the best way to describe A.D. Mitchell's game as he transitions to the NFL is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. He is fast, but not for too fast. He is a good route runner, but not necessarily an elite route runner, and he has good size to play the receiver position. If there is one thing that AD is great at, it's hauling in the pigskin. Over the course of the last 2 seasons, AD was targeted 103 times and had a singular drop. You won't confuse AD Mitchell with the best route runners in the NFL, but that's fine because we're talking about a prospect who will probably go anywhere in the 25 to 40 range of the 2024 NFL draft, and not in the top 4 or 5 picks. But what I will positively say about AD is I think he does a good enough job to get open due to his footwork. He does a very good job at chopping his feet right off the line of scrimmage, and there were several slant routes during the 2023 season where Mitchell made Quinn Ewers' job as easy as he possibly could have. I tweeted this back in January, but my comp for him is the Steelers' George Pickens, and I think AD might be even bigger. Both guys should be 1,000-yard receivers for a long time, but both guys have some limitations to their game, specifically within the route tree. Neither player is the most agile, but pertaining to Mitchell, and inevitably this applies to Pickens as well, it doesn't really matter when they are good at so many other things. I think the best way to look at Mitchell as a prospect is to use the old saying, focus on what a player can do versus what a player can't do and go from there. If you have a receiver who has great size, good speed, great hands, and is a good route runner, why wouldn't you take him in the first round? I think an NFL team will get a steal with AD Mitchell, despite him probably being a late first-round pick. Ultimately, I think there will be 6 receivers taken in the first round, and I think AD will be one of them. If there was a redo of the 2022 draft, there is no doubt George Pickens would be a first-round pick, and I don't think NFL teams will make that mistake this time around. There's not a lot of negatives to Mitchell's game, and even the negatives that there are to me are kind of overblown. He is one of the most talented guys in the class, and I would be disappointed if he's not a multiple-time 1,000-yard player. Troy Franklin had a solid 2022 season in which he had nearly 900 yards and 9 touchdowns, and he built on that in 2023 as he would finish with nearly 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns as he was on his way to being a first-team all-conference player. One of the first things you'll notice about Troy when watching him on tape is speed. Not just speed, but elite speed. A lot of the time when you see a guy have high-end speed, you usually think, or assume at least, the guy is a one-trick pony, and that if you essentially shade a single high safety to his side of the field, that he can effectively be taken away, but Franklin is a pretty good route runner for his size. Not only is he a good route runner, but he has great yak ability, and I don't think that's something you hear a lot about with Franklin. He averaged 6.6 yards after the catch in 2023, which was actually the same as LSU's Malik Neighbors. Neighbors is a player we will discuss later in the video, but Franklin to me is a player who can be a late first round pick and have 800 yards as a rookie along with 5 or 6 touchdowns. This would of course have to be in a situation where Franklin would be set up for success, because one part of his game that will need some work is his contested catching or jump ball ability. Given he is 6'3" and is a tremendous athlete, yes, there will be clips of him winning jump balls and pulling down tough catches, but he caught just 7 of 19 contested catches in 2023 for a rate of just 36.8%. This was after a year in 2022 in which he caught 7 of 11 contested catches for a rate of 63.6%. He was 0 of 7 back in 2021, which ultimately gives him a lifetime rate of just 37.8%, and I think the best way we can describe this part of Franklin's game is inconsistent. One other part of Franklin's game that will need some work is drops, as he dropped 9 balls in 2023 compared to just 2 in 2022. I worry less about the drops than I do in him in jump ball situations, because Troy has shown that drops are not always a big factor in his game. Not only that, but he had a single drop in his last 4 games during his time at Oregon, and drops are pretty fixable, whereas contested catches or jump balls most of the time are truly 50-50, and it's not exactly something that can be easily corrected as drops. He's also not as flexible as other receivers in this class, but Troy should be just fine in the NFL. I would love for him to go to Buffalo and to get paired up with Josh Allen for the sake of his NFL career. He is a very unique weapon, and there is a lot to like here with Troy Franklin. Brian Thomas Jr. exploded onto the scene in 2023 with a near 1,200-yard season along with 17 receiving touchdowns. There is a lot to like about Thomas's game as he transitions to the pros, as he is a 6'4", 200-pound receiver. Thomas is very fast for his size and gets to his top speed fast, and despite being as tall as he is, he's not your typical big body receiver. When you think of big body receivers, you may think of guys that are 6'5", 225 that run 4.640s and aren't the quickest, but Thomas is significantly faster than your average guy that's 6'3" or taller. He's a great tracker of the football, and in his final year at LSU, he caught 7 of 13 balls that were considered contested catches, which is about where you hope he would be. Anything above 50% is good for a receiver, and Thomas improved at this during his time at LSU, as he went from 38.5% in 2021, 50% in 2022, and 53.8% in 2023. His drop percentage also improved throughout his time as a Tiger, and his drop rate in his final year was down to just 6.8%. I love Thomas's game, and he is one of my favorite prospects in this class, but one thing that people will point to as a negative for Thomas, and you may have even picked up on it in the highlights we've shown so far, but 60% of his routes during his time at LSU were fade routes, and that's per Brett Coleman, and a lot of other routes he ran were drags or hitches, which you've probably seen too. This was frustrating because when you watch Thomas's footwork on fade routes, there's times where he creates separation off the line, and I don't think it's a matter of him not being able to run other routes like a dig or a deep post or a blaze out or anything. The LSU coaches simply didn't call for Brian to run those routes. I don't think it's a matter of him not being able to run those routes and that he's a one-trick pony at the NFL level and that he can't win with separation, because he's shown on tape he can, multiple times in fact. Thomas is a comfortable first-round pick, and the destination I would love for him to go to most is Buffalo at the end of round 1, but I don't think he'll fall that far. This not only applies to Brian, but for the final few receivers we'll discuss in the video too, but I don't see any way how Thomas won't be successful at the NFL level. He's tall, he's fast, he's quick, he has great hands, he's a good route runner, and despite him being a round 1 talent, I honestly think he's a tad underrated, and think whatever team drafts him will fall in love immediately. He will be just 22 years old for most of his rookie season, and he should be a big-time contributor in year 1. Thomas Jr. is an easy first-round pick, and he should punish defenses at the NFL level for a very long time. Rome Odunze is a very unique receiving prospect, and I think the consensus on him is he's a very good prospect, but the only question is how good, and it depends who you ask. Daniel Jeremiah had him at number 3 overall on his big board, which I thought was a little high, but I understand the love for Rome. He is a big-bodied athletic receiver with great hands. He has the ability to do it all, and one of Rome's biggest strengths is, well, his strength. He is listed at 215 pounds, and I have no doubt he was a true 215 because, quite frankly, Rome was a bully on the field in 2023. He finished the year with over 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns in 2023 and will almost certainly be a top 10 draft pick. I think the most impressive part about Rome's 2023 season is he hauled in 21 of 28 contested catches for a rate of 75%. A 75% contested catch rate is unreal, and to give you an idea of how unreal it is, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. had a contested catch rate of 43.3% in 2023, Malik Neighbors had a contested catch rate of 45.5% in 2023, and Ja'Marr Chase had a contested catch rate of 50% back in 2019. 50 to 55% is considered great, and to be 20% above great gives you an idea of how good of a year Rome had in this part of his game, and he will certainly take that part of his game to the next level. Obviously, he won't have a 75-25 rate of contested catches throughout his NFL career, but you get the point of how dominant he was in 2023. I think Rome's game compares very favorably to DeAndre Hopkins at the Titans, as both receivers are big-bodied guys who are very strong at the point of attack, and neither player drops many passes. One thing you could say about DeAndre that I think will also apply to Rome is neither receiver will be viewed as an elite route runner or be in the conversation of the best route runners of their era. That's no disrespect to DeAndre either, as I think he will be a Hall of Famer at some point, but that wasn't his game and it's not Rome's either. Obviously, neither player is a bad route runner per se, but they have the ability to do what's most important for their job, consistently catch passes, which they both do. Two other players I think Rome favorably compares to is Devontae Adams of the Raiders and 2013 Hall of Famer Chris Carter. These are some very lofty comps for Rome, and if you've noticed, I haven't had a comp for everybody because I'm not a huge fan of forcing comps just to force comps, but stylistically speaking, I think Rome compares to these three guys. Odunze will not run a 4.3 40, but you know what he will do? Consistently catch passes for close to a decade and play at a high level. Don't get lost in the hype of Marvin Neighbors. Rome Odunze is a damn good prospect. Malik Neighbors is a fun receiving prospect, and after a 1,000-yard year in 2022 in which he caught just 3 touchdowns with the Tigers, he would go on to have nearly 1,600 yards and 14 touchdowns in his final year with LSU in 2023. There is so much to like with Neighbors' game that when you find a weakness, it's almost like nitpicking something just to find in the scouting report. I think the first thing you notice with Neighbors when watching him on tape is how explosive he is off the line of scrimmage, which will most definitely translate to the NFL. And not only is he fast off the line, but he also has great long speed and is a true deep threat. He's not just a deep threat though, and he makes a ton of plays with the ball in his hands after the play. Malik is just as good of a yak threat as he is a deep threat, and there's times where it's like watching a highlight reel. He's a very good route runner, and he also has good ball tracking skills, and on passes thrown 20 plus yards from the line of scrimmage in 2023, he had 19 receptions on 29 targets for 624 yards and 9 touchdowns, meaning on about a third of the deep targets in 2023, Malik Neighbors took it to the house for 6. Neighbors in a lot of ways was built for today's NFL, and he is one of the younger prospects in this class, and he won't turn 21 until the end of July before his rookie year starts. I tweeted this earlier in the draft process, but I think one of Neighbors' biggest weaknesses, and I say weaknesses with quotations around it because this is how silly it is having Marvin Harrison Jr. in the same draft class as him. If Neighbors were in the 2023 class with Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison, I think Neighbors goes first and by a landslide. And this is after a rookie year for Addison, who had double-digit touchdowns, and Flowers, who was the leading receiver on a team that went to the AFC Championship game. We mentioned Neighbors' contested catch rate during Rome Odunze's segment, and yes, Malik's contested catch numbers were lower than Rome's, but he's 6 feet and 200 pounds, meaning he is the smallest of the top 4 guys in this class, so it should be expected that his contested catch numbers are lower than the other guys. If an NFL team were drafting Neighbors to be a jump ball guy, then that's really on them and not at all maximizing what a player can do with their unique skill sets. If you want Neighbors to run quick outs or slants at a high rate just to get the ball in his hands, he can do that, and at a high level. But if you want to occasionally catch a defense off guard and have him run a go route, he can do that too. Neighbors is a receiver built for today's NFL, and if he's not a consistent 1,000-yard receiver, then that's probably on the team that drafted him, because talent here is certainly not the issue. I'm sure you've heard it all with Marvin Harrison Jr. He's this, he's that, he's the best prospect since Calvin Johnson Jr., even better than Jamar Chase back in 2021, and the list goes on. Marvin is the best receiving prospect I've ever evaluated, and the harder thing with him is finding flaws in his game of what not to like rather than what there is to like. Michigan and Ohio State are two of the biggest rivals in football, and some would say the biggest rivals in all of college football, but I'll leave that for you guys to debate and get back to Marv. When Marv played Michigan in 2022 and 2023, all he did was go for a combined 12 receptions for 238 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns in the 2 games he played against them. Yes, for any Michigan fans watching, Ohio State lost both games, but it was not because of Marv. My personal favorite play of his college career came against Michigan in what would turn out to be his final game at Ohio State, and they were looking to score before half. They were down 4, and Kyle McCord essentially said, "Screw it, Marvin is down there somewhere," and while Marvin was getting tackled in a clear DPI, he pulled the ball down for a huge gain for the Buckeyes. Despite being 6'4", Marvin has phenomenal footwork, and that's not just great footwork for a big fella, he has great feet for any receiver, and one thing Harrison Jr. does well is he plays with a pace you don't see a lot of young receivers do. A lot of young receivers will go 100% gas, no brakes, but Marv is patient and will hit corners with several changeups throughout the game, and he showed this quite a bit during the Penn State game. He's a great ball tracker, and he can and will adjust no matter where it's thrown, and he has great field awareness near the sideline. Because he has good feet, you can play him anywhere you want offensively, whether that's outside or in the slot too, it really doesn't matter. Just move him around and get him the rock and let him pay dividends. This doesn't just apply to MHJ, but guys at other positions like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. at linebacker or Chris Jenkins on the defensive line, but you can tell when guys' dads played in the league because they've been taught everything the right way, whether it's Marv setting up defenders or Trotter Jr. and Jenkins doing things related to their positions. I have no doubt Marv Sr. has been teaching Marv Jr. since he was young, and you saw it every single Saturday. The only knocks I've seen on Marv is that some people think he's a little light for his frame, which I can understand as he's not rocked up like other NFL receivers, and that his yak ability isn't where guys like Malik Neighbors' yak ability is. But when you do everything right like Marv does leading up to the catch, I think he'll be just fine at the NFL level. Marv should be a top 5 pick and an instant 1,000-yard receiver at the NFL level. Prospects do not come around like this often, and he can and will dominate in the NFL for a long time. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 31% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.